Hey there, I'm Lee Ullman here with some big news from the National Young Farmers Coalition. We're partnering with Heritage Radio Network on a special season of The Farm Report. It's all about what's happening with the Farm Bill and how it impacts farmers and eaters.
I am growing diversified vegetables on land that's been in our family for 150 years.
And so with the pandemic, gentrification, property values going up, we had to sell the land and we lost it.
Join us as we uncover the untold stories behind this massive piece of legislation that shapes how we grow our food, what we eat, and so much more.
The problems we have had, those are things that come from earlier Farm Bill and USDA policy, right? Like Earl Butts, get big or get out.
You know, it's my responsibility to know not only what I'm eating, but then like how that all came to be. And realize like, wow, like this piece of legislation, all this money, like it's technically something that I support as a taxpayer.
While Congress debates the next Farm Bill, this is not just an invitation to listen. It's a call to action. Be part of the conversation. Subscribe to the Farm Report on Heritage Radio Network, wherever you listen to podcasts.
This episode is presented by Shacksbury Cider.
This week on Meat and Three, we're getting semantic to understand the deeper meaning behind some of the foods we love. First, we'll look at the big debate happening around the word milk.
Who the hell are you to tell me what is the name of my product and my landscape and everything we've cared about when, you don't have anything invested in except to put out a little money to buy it? It's our entire life.
Then we get the lowdown on the language of cider.
So the first thing that's really confusing about dryness is that it has nothing to do with how something actually feels in your mouth.
And finally, we get our fill of tiki talk.
You don't walk into a tiki bar and be like, oh yeah, this is what Polynesia is probably like. Like, it's supposed to be like fantasy and stuff. That's the hard part. It's so easy to do tiki bad, and that's where it gets a bad name.
Tune into this week's episode of Meat and Three. That's MEAT+THREE. Available wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hello, and welcome to A Hungry Society. I'm Portia Wilson, and this is the show where we talk about food, food media, and so much more. Today's guest is Omar Tate, a founder and chef of Honeysuckle Pop-Ups, as well as a sous chef at the Henry in the Life Hotel. Chef Omar Tate has spent the last 10 years in the restaurant industry, working in some of the best restaurants in New York City and Philadelphia. He finds the intersection of science, art, craft, and the physicality of line cooking to be unique and the most alluring aspect of the profession. Chef Omar has been exploring his heritage to bring balance and equity to his profession. He has researched and produced dinners dedicated to honoring chefs, writers, and figures in history representative of African American culture. Currently, he is a sous chef among executive chefs. I knew I was going to mess that up. It's not a Hungry Society if I don't mess up the intro like at least once.
Let's just say it again. I work at the Henry.
Yeah, you work at the Henry alongside Chef JJ Johnson. Shout out to JJ, he's been on the show. And Chef de Cuisine, Samantha Davis. Shout out to Samantha, too.
Shout out to Samantha.
He is also the mind behind Honeysuckle, which I said, dedicated to exploring Black heritage through food, using various forms of art to bring stories to the plate and engage with diners.
That's all true.
Omar, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I feel like this has been in the making for quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I still remember that time when I walked over to your table when no one told me that you had a reservation.
Yeah, oh my God, yes, when I went to Henry for the first time, and you came over and I was like, I know you, but we had never met.
Nope. Thanks, Instagram.
Yeah. Thank you, Instagram. So we have, there's so much I want to talk to you about, but first I want to start with, I think, my favorite poem you've ever written. So for listeners who maybe aren't familiar with your Instagram, in addition to food and news about Honeysuckle, you also post drawings and poetry and, thoughts and
Yeah.
things you observe on the subway.
All the parts.
All the things. So I just want to read this, and it's called Angel Investor. I want a place with fire, a place with fire and wood where the animals hang. And smoke. They can smoke for hours on end, just like before we stopped making it. Stopped making the food at that place around the fire. All around, where we could be down. Our hair dropped low down. Bread broken, not a dime in that place where the animals hang. Where the plates ain't white, and the plates ain't right. Too black and ain't too broke to die from laughing. From stories told around that fire, us camped around a wood-burning stove. At that BYOB, under a shiny moon, crimson-cheeked, brown butter cake-faced lovers. Smushed like smiling nuptials, we huddled around our fire. Merry with cheer under the smoke where the animals hang.
Thank you very much for not making me read that.
No, that's my favorite poem of yours.
Thank you very much.
So yeah, let's start. It's hard to know where to start with your story because I think there's so many different things that come together.
Mm-hmm.
But for you, where does your culinary story start?
So my culinary story starts when I didn't really care very much about food until I knew I needed a job that could define myself. So about 10 years ago, when I was just a bum, kind of just selling drugs and doing nothing, I applied for a job at this place called Rivercrest Golf Club that was like 30 miles outside of Philadelphia. And I lied on a resume and said that I knew how to cook, or at least be a prep cook. Because prior to that, I had 3 years experience as a porter in hotels, and I worked closely with chefs, but didn't care about them at all. And so I just used that as leverage to gain access to this place. But the funniest part about this story is that it was 2.5 hours away by public transportation. So I got all the way there. They hired me on the spot and said, "Can you start tomorrow?" And I was like, "No, I can start Monday." I can start Monday. So I started Monday, and the very first thing they asked me was, "Can you brunoise a shallot?" And I was like, "What's a shallot?" And what's a brunoise? So they were like, "You don't know what the fuck you're doing, do you?" And I said, "No, not really." But they really appreciated the fact that I made that effort to get all the way out there. So they taught me how to do cooking stuff. I did that for a year and a half.
They taught you, what a shallot was and brunoise.
Yeah. Shallot, brunoise, but I mean, not just that. Like how to move in the kitchen. How just so many different things. So the place had 3 different restaurants. There was a banquet where they did weddings with no less than $20,000. There was a casual restaurant that served pizza and a whole bunch of stuff, and then there was a fine dining restaurant. And I've worked in all 3. Mm-hmm. So essentially, I went to school there, and they were paying me $10 an hour. I worked 14 hours a day and got paid for 40 for a year and a half. But I didn't care at that point because I knew that it was worth it. And then I failed miserably at that place and quit.
So when did you decide this was going to be something that you dedicated a lot of time to? When did you decide you wanted to be a chef?
Honestly, as soon as I stepped foot in that place, I knew that's what I wanted. My son, Bashir, who's 11, at that point was not even a year, I don't think. And, this was 2008, so he wasn't even a year. And I knew that more importantly than just I want to be a chef, I wanted to give him a skill. Because no one really not no one, but it's really difficult to find that sort of lineage in our families where you pass on something to someone. People talk about passing on property and assets and stuff like that, but more importantly, just creating a foundation where even if I can't pass him an asset, I can give him a skill set in hopes that he will be able to acquire one himself,
Mm-hmm.
And then he won't have to go to school for that. He's not going to be in debt for that. So like, that was the real motivation behind it, more than anything else. And then I fell in love with it. I realized that so much about it just kind of spoke to me. It's very physical. It's very mental. There's art involved. There's science involved. So I was constantly in an environment, and still am constantly in an environment where like I'm just always excited,
So you mentioned, heritage and lineage and passing things down and food traditions, and that speaks to so much of what Honeysuckle is about. Can you tell listeners about Honeysuckle?
Yeah. So Honeysuckle basically, before I talk about what it is, the reason why I call it Honeysuckle is because I felt like at the time, this is like about 3 years ago, when I started to fall out of love with cooking, or at least the profession of cooking. I felt like I needed to find myself. So mentally, I had to go back home to my row home in Philadelphia, where outside of that door on the side of the house was a honeysuckle bush, and it was very fragrant, very beautiful, and delicious if you ate the stem in the center of it. And it just brought me back to a place of innocence where I was able to imagine again, So what did that imagination bring? It brought all the teachings that I was being taught from my mother in that household. It brought that environment back. It brought my elementary schools back, all the pictures on the wall, my teachers, I could see all their faces, I could smell the lunch cafeteria again. Stories about my father, stuff like all sorts of things, right? And part of the reason why I started to fall out of love with the profession was that I was being let down a lot in like positions of management, where like when I was a line cook, there was never any problem, right? But as soon as like you're in a position of management, you're like, you can seem threatening, you can seem all sorts of things. Like people are, when they deny you positions, they're denying everything that comes along with you, right? Because I mean, most management positions require a certain level of creativity, but especially so in the kitchen. So if you're not ready for me to hold a specific title, then you're not ready for me in general. It's like that stupid Marilyn Monroe saying, you can't have me at my words, you can't have me at my
Memes.
Right?
Yeah.
So, that was a big letdown. And so going back to that brought about so much about like my blackness, where in kitchens, like that didn't matter at all. My blackness didn't matter at all. And actually almost no one's ethnicity mattered at all. And everyone's attitude and ego did. And I'm not about any of that shit. So I'm about character and about worth and value and love at the end of the day. And in the kitchens that I came up in, outside of 2 of them, were not about love. So basically I try to engage diners in Honeysuckle with blackness, beginning with love, and exploring what that means on plates through the use of visual art, literature, history, heritage, and then food and cooking. The food is just like a vessel to kind of like talk about that. And ultimately, Honeysuckle kind of stands as this like idea of like, what could our world look like if everything that we were doing in a restaurant was not coming from a Eurocentric place. So like yesterday I was having a conversation with someone who she said that she was like really happy and proud of what I was doing, talking about the contributions of African Americans to the Northern Hemisphere and in America. And I wasn't upset with that statement, but what I said to her was, it's not about contributions, because African Americans aren't contributing, we're continuing. Everyone else is contributing. Spaghetti and meatballs is a contribution. Cornbread is a continuation.
Right.
That
implies that like we're showing up now, but like we've always been here.
Right. I mean, we've always been showing up.
Right.
We've always been showing up.
We've been showing up, but we haven't been seen.
Right. We haven't been seen.
Right.
So Honeysuckle is looking to stand to like, what would it look like if America just accepted that America is black? So,
yeah, I one of the whole menu is very cool and straightforward, and one of the my most favorite things that you have on the menu is homemade Kool-Aid packets. And we talked about this before, but can you talk about how that like course came together?
Yeah. So I watched the very first episode of Chef's Table ever, and I think it was Massimo Bottura. And in the very beginning, first of all, I turned the episode off after like 8 minutes, but like not because I was mad. I was confused, right? So Massimo Bottura is amazing. He's an artist, right? And
like world-renowned chef in Modena, Italy.
Yeah. He has a restaurant called Osteria Francescana that I think they're still serving the same menu that he started out with. But but he's an artist, and he's a philanthropist, and he is an activist. But when I saw his very first episode of Chef's Table, in the beginning, he talked about like how the flour or the pieces of pasta that his grandmother was making would fall off the table. He'd be standing at the table and or below the table and catch it and eat raw pasta, and like it was beautiful and lovely and whatever. So when I saw that episode, I'm like, there's so many white chefs out here that are able to tell that story, right?
Yeah.
And secondly, that's just not my story. I've never had a single thing that my grandma cooked. Never, not one thing. And but I've had several things that my mom cooked. So like, what is that nostalgia for me? Kool-Aid, right? My mom would like pretty much keep us out of the kitchen until it was dinner time because we would just get on her nerves. I'm the oldest of four boys who like are we're all pretty close in age. So she's like stay the hell out of the kitchen.
Get out, go play.
Right? Yeah, go play, go read, whatever. So. But when it was close to dinner time, she would ask me to make the Kool-Aid. And she would ask me to make the Kool-Aid because she always said that I made the best Kool-Aid. Like, and she could always tell if I didn't make it, and she would get upset.
I was bad at making Kool-Aid. Real bad.
Well, see, I think that the thing is, no one ever understood that we're not actually making it.
Yeah, no, you're just adding sugar and water.
Right? So, but like, I really loved this part, and I loved being the one that could make it the best, right? So I was like, how can I bring that to my guests? But also, how can I do it in a way that's not shitty? Like Kool-Aid actually is when you really look at it. It's like a chemical substance. So I use freeze-dried fruit and citric acid and sugar, balanced all that out and put it into a packet for people to stir at the table. And everyone loved it. But the biggest part of it is that, there's also this stigma. Like Kool-Aid is like the modern watermelon, right? So like niggas love Kool-Aid. That's pretty much the statement. And I'm like, you know what? Yeah, we do.
Right.
We do.
No, seriously.
Right. Yeah. I love it. When I go back home and I go see my aunt, they ask me if I want Kool-Aid. Like, that's love. You know what I mean? That's love. So, regardless of what the thing is, there's value in that. And when I saw that episode of Chef's Table, I was like, I'm not going to allow that to be devalued,
And also, it's just from like a perspective of telling different stories. Like, it's such a played out narrative. There's so many stories about being at your grandmother's knee while she's making whatever.
Right. I mean, it's almost at the point now where like, for every person, white, black, orange, purple, whatever, like that has to be your story for it to be told, right?
Well, I think that speaks to not wanting to be uncomfortable. So one of the things I love so much about your writing and your pop-ups is that you don't shy away from highlighting like Black urban foodways, which I feel like a lot of people don't really want to look at. Like it has to be something that's a bit more, like this like agricultural sort of grandmothery narrative that makes people feel really happy. And I feel like looking at Black urban foodways like makes people look at some of the ways in which this country has relegated food and who gets to eat what and who has access to what and all that. And I think that doesn't look as good on a chef's table as Massimo talking about eating fresh pasta from his grandmother's table.
Right. But I also think that comes down to like who's actually filming it. Like if Spike Lee filmed it, would it look good? Of course it would. Basically, I came up in a time, like as a cook, in a time where like farm to table was like the explosion, right? So I think that has a lot to do with it. But something that people don't ever really say is that, honestly, everyone eats farm to table. It just depends on like what farm it's coming from. Is it coming from a factory farm, or do you live in the suburbs and you get to see your farmer at the farmer's market every day because he pops up at like near your Whole Foods, or do you get to go out to dinner can you afford to go out to dinner where you can go to a restaurant where a chef is engaged with the farmer like one-on-one like that. When I was growing up, my mom's a very smart person, and she understood food. She became a physical trainer, and we were doing Kempo. So she was just like all about like what we put into our bodies, and she went out of her way to go to like farmers markets and produce markets and stuff like that outside of our neighborhood to bring us fresh and organic food. I still remember the first time I ate an organic apple. It was like, what? I didn't know that food could taste like that. But everyone else, or most of the people that I knew, just didn't have that same experience, right? And then when my mom lost her car, we weren't able to eat like that anymore. So like, I recently did a demo and a lecture for the students of Columbia, or nutrition students of Columbia at God's Love We Deliver. And I suggested to them, like, why do these farmers markets always end up in places where, I know they're making efforts and like you can use EBT and you can talk to the farmer and you can like, why don't you grow collard greens? And then they come back next week with collard greens or whatever. But like, why don't they put those farmers markets like, I don't know, in Canarsie, and like have people from Park Slope drive out to Canarsie?
Right.
That's access. That's access. That's actually like infrastructural change, and it's relatable because the kids are going to go to the park. The parents are going to go to the park with the kids. They're going to see the farmer. They're going to see the produce. They're going to be curious. And then those EBT stamps matter,
Yeah, there's this like fantastic interview with you, the Black Men Reading series.
Oh yeah, Leslie.
Yeah,
Leslie Reese.
It's Google Black Men Reading series, and there's a Q&A with Omar.
It's a really great series, by the way. I feel like that deserves to be in like Essence or something, like I just can't believe
should be.
Yeah.
But there was this great question about the ways in which Black womanhood is able to be viewed with like this like holistic sort of thing, not just in this idea of like service to others, but like creativity and self-care and all of these things. And you were talking about how there's not really Black men aren't seen that way. I'm curious if you see that in the culinary world as well, or do you feel like there's Black male chefs have the ability to be seen in like the wholesome way?
I don't know. I think it kind of depends, well, there's two things that I notice. I notice that when I'm focused or engaged in an activity that's about like community or activism or anything like that, the majority of the room is women. When in terms of professionalism, regardless of color, the room is usually men, right? So I think that in the professional realm, all men or almost all professional men in the kitchen like to look rugged. The whole tattoo thing. It's almost a badge of honor to say I didn't sleep last night and I went out drinking. Like seriously, it's totally a part of the culture. And as people of all ethnicities adopt that culture, no, they're not looked at as like cared over or gentle or nurturing or any of that. So yeah, to answer that question, no, I don't think that Black men are seen in that light. And I don't know how much of that comes along with just the industry and how much they're bringing into that industry, but the industry as a whole has not yet allowed for that narrative to be really talked about.
Yeah. Also, in that great interview, you talk about the emotions being narrowed into the duality of love and fear. And you've mentioned love a couple of times in like Honeysuckle, the meal starting from that place of love. I'm curious about how fear plays into anything you do. Does it? Or do you try to eliminate it?
The only fear that I have is that this door is going to close. This door that we're in right now, that's wide open for minorities to have access to these places. And Honeysuckle, with that, I'm trying to like take off the old door, build a brand new one, change the lock. So
I mean, that's I hear you, because I feel the same way. Like, in 10 years, is someone gonna?
I wouldn't even say in 10 years. You know, the president that we have is part of the reason why this door is open.
Right.
Hopefully, if we do it right, he won't be the president anymore. What's going to happen to that door then?
Right.
You know. So yeah, that's the only fear that I have. Other than that, you know, no, because I mean, quite frankly, you know, with my next pop up with Kraft and Tom Click, they're not afraid. You know, that's why they asked me to do it.
Right.
You know, I wasn't afraid before I came in. I just don't have any room for it. That's all.
I mean, that's I was talking to someone about the whole seat at the table metaphor, and like I think that's been like galvanizing for a lot of people, but honestly, I'm over it. Like, I don't want your seat at the table. Like, why are you at the table? Who built the table?
Right.
Like, fuck the table.
Right.
Like, yeah, it's the door thing. It's like, why is there a door?
Right.
Let's knock down the door.
Right.
Let's have a cocktail party. Let's like,
right,
there's so many like.
It
just, I think our thinking about it has to change.
Right, and you know, a lot of people are, but I still think that, and you know, me as well. I'm not like some crazy radical just coming in here, you know, guns ablazing or anything, but people are taking measured steps, and I think that like the benefit of Honeysuckle being a pop-up is that the only measure that I have is myself, you know, and I've been fortunate enough to have people like mostly donate me spaces, but if they weren't, I would use my own money to put myself into a space and bring people into this imaginary world. Like, I have this joke, Honeysuckle's my fake ass restaurant, you know, invite people to my fake ass restaurant just to kind of see.
Have you looked to see if that's available as a URL?
What's that?
A fake ass restaurant. Because you should take it if it's not already taken. That would be dope if it was
yeah. You know, that's well. Now that you said it, I'm pretty sure someone's already buying it. Right now.
Someone's like, thank you.
Right. Yeah.
But speaking of Honeysuckle, can you tell listeners about your next dinner?
Yeah. So the next dinner is on May 20th at Kraft in the PDR. It's a 7-course menu, and you know, actually, after I wrote the menu and like looked at the poetry that I wrote that goes along with the menu. So also at Honeysuckle, it's a really full experience where it's not just dinner. I write poetry and create a zine that people can take with them, and the themes in the poetry usually go along with the meal. So after reading the poetry and looking at the meal itself, I realized that a lot of the themes, or the main themes, were about freedom and possibility. So like, you know, when I say freedom, obviously we are living in a free society, but what if we were actually allowed to live in a real free society, and what would that look like, right? So each course, like the first course is, but one of them is a giveaway called Penny Candy, and there was a penny candy store in my neighborhood where I grew up, and it kind of closed, and I was like...
Was it in somebody's house, or was it actual store?
It was an actual store, but it was small. I mean, it wasn't much bigger than this studio. And this woman named Jay ran it. It was called Jay's, and you know, as kids, we're innocent, we're going in there, we're buying the penny candy, and then one day it was just like gone, poof, right? So we have to go out into the world. And like, I mean, at least in my mind, that's like kind of how it felt to me going out into the world now. Like, you know, you don't get anything for a penny, right? So... The next course is a salami that I learned about. Well, not a salami, but a dried sausage that I learned about in a book called Plantation Row, The Origins of Soul Food. And it described this family, or this group of enslaved Africans procuring sausage meat after a pig harvest and they seasoned it with sage and chilies, other seasonings, and then they wrapped it in a corn husk and hung it near the hearth, and they would just eat it occasionally. And then in the very end, it says sometimes there would be some mold on it, but it would still be fine. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I mean, I've made a lot of salami in my life and butchered a lot of animals, and I was like, that's salami.
Yeah.
So, had in my mind had the promise of Reconstruction continued, would we be eating that as an American product? Mm-hmm. We could only be eating it if they were actually free. We could only respect it if they were actually respected. Right. So I made that, and I'm serving it with chow chow from a woman. I bought it from a woman named Wanda that I met in Louisiana, but she actually lives in Oakland. But she's been making chow chow for a while, and this is just another example of something that could be respected, that we could actually eat, and could be recognized as an American food. Mm-hmm. But it's not, because these people weren't allowed to do so, and that we're all products of that, I don't know, backwards ass evolution, right? So, that's one. That's the first course. The next course is a course called New York Oyster Stew, circa 1826, and that's in honor of a man named Thomas Downey. And Thomas Downey had an oyster refectory on Wall Street, where he also used it. He was like rich and free in the mid-19th century, and used his refectory to aid people on the Underground Railroad into Canada for freedom. Right, so he risked his own freedom for the possibility of someone else's freedom. The next course is Etna's Meadow, and around spring, late spring, early summer, every year, if I do a dinner or even at home, I'll go to the farmer's market and buy a bunch of stuff, wild lettuces, wild leaves, and her book, I got it from a Taste of Country Cooking. Her book, her salads were always just things that the children gathered, out in the field, and people would eat it alongside whatever they were eating. And that book itself is just beautiful. It's just an amazing book that talks about a town called Freetown, a beautiful space. There's nothing bad in that book.
It's so idyllic, and it just makes you feel oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, people don't even know that it existed.
Yeah. I mean, something I've been thinking about recently, because the new edition just came out with a foreword by Alice Waters, and so I'm rereading, and I was thinking about, well, what does my Freetown look like? Where is that?
Right.
If someone asks where is my Freetown? Do you have a Freetown?
Do I have a Freetown? Yeah, it's Honeysuckle, May 20th.
Your Freetown is Honeysuckle Dinners.
Honeysuckle Dinners, May 20th.
A fake ass restaurant.
I don't know. I mean, I guess what's Freetown to us now? I don't know. I don't think that I have that answer, honestly.
Just something to think about.
Yeah.
But continue with your.
The next one is called Br'er Rabbit, and it's there's these tales called the Uncle Remus tales, black folklore tales that were being told in secret during the period of slavery, enslavement, and carried on through, and have since kind of disappeared from our consciousness. But the stories were about, Br'er Rabbit was a character, and he was known as the trickster, and he would trick his way around these other creatures who kind of represented different aspects of plantation life or rural life for an enslaved African at that time, to gain the rabbit access to food or whatever. It was trickery to give, at least just for a moment, a second of freedom, for that creature. So it's a fried rabbit course with a sauce called Sauce Beautiful, and shouts out to Mr. Ted Lee for putting me on to Princess Pamela. And I didn't know anything about her until 2 months ago. And prior to that, I didn't know what I was going to do with this rabbit. But then I saw Sauce Beautiful in the book, and she served it with her fried chicken. And for people who don't know, Princess Pamela was a woman who ran a restaurant in New York. She left the South at the age of 11 years old and worked her way in kitchens and found freedom for herself and an identity for herself through cooking for people who just so happened to be like famous and stuff in New York. And so she made this dish called Sauce Beautiful after her mother, because her mother's name was Beautiful. So yeah, that's that course. I just think that like all of that is just lovely.
That's great.
The one after that is honeysuckle ice cream, which I serve at everyone. It's literally that, honeysuckle ice cream. And the last course is called the Rose. So the meal will actually begin and end with, oddly enough, Tupac. So the welcome cocktail is actually Thug Passion that he kind of popularized through his music. And the Rose is a meringue of black ash with blackberry, sugarcane ash with blackberry filling. Candied rose. And I don't know, Tupac was always kind of like caught in the crux of like what the possibility of freeing himself was, you know. And I have this like idea that he hurtled himself into oblivion because he was constantly like at the nexus of it and just couldn't get out of himself. So in my most contemporary mind, exercising that as a black person in this country is always just like almost always feel like a confrontation at some point.
Right.
You know?
Wow. Well, I'll be there. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more with Omar Tate.
This episode is brought to you by Shacksbury Cider, who believe cider can be daring, complex, and eminently drinkable. Located in Vergennes, Vermont, Shacksbury make a broad offering of ciders, from the bright and fruity rosé to inventive, small-batch wild apple fermentation. Each fall, Shacksbury takes to the hills of Vermont to forage for the wild and forgotten fruit that make up their Lost Apple Project. Shacksbury, producer of the first American-made Pet Nat cider, continues to experiment every year with limited edition ciders designed to spotlight locally foraged fruit. To learn more, visit shacksbury.com or follow them on Instagram at Shacksbury.
Are you enjoying this podcast? Heritage Radio Network has plenty more. My name is Sari Kamen.
And I'm Leah Kurtz. And together we host Food Without Borders here on HRN.
Immigrants make our food system vibrant, diverse, and delicious.
Each week, we invite a guest to talk about how food connects them to their past as we explore what it's like to be an immigrant in the U.S. today.
You can find Food Without Borders wherever you listen to podcasts and on heritageradionetwork.org.
All right, so we are back with Chef Omar Tate. And now we're going to talk about the role that dining has played in your life. We got into it a little bit before, but I'm curious if you had, beyond making the Kool-Aid, if there were any like dining traditions that you had with your family growing up.
Yeah, absolutely. Fried fish. My mom makes the best fried fish in the world. Fight me. I don't care.
Is it whiting?
It's whiting.
Yeah.
It's whiting. Sometimes she used to buy this fish called sway, but it's mostly whiting. And she would make that with, oftentimes with stewed greens or green beans and what else? Crabs, snow crabs especially. We ate a lot of snow crab. Didn't really eat a lot of blue crab. But the most interesting thing about us eating crab is that we actually didn't eat it for a long while because I don't know if I told you I was raised Muslim. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if it's like the teachings of the Nation of Islam or if it's actually in the Quran itself, like the real Quran itself, but you're not supposed to eat like bottom feeders and stuff like that.
You can't eat crabs?
Tell me about it, right? So,
I love crabs. One of my
right? No.
things.
You're from Maryland, right? Of course you love crabs. But like crab eating is like in the blood. My family is from like ancestrally from Charleston, from Orangeburg, South Carolina, into Charleston, and like obviously seafood, crabs, mussels, all that stuff, oysters. So we didn't eat any of that kind of stuff until I guess my mom had she broke down. Was like, I got to get me some crabs because she actually grew up Baptist and converted to Islam in the 80s, like a lot of black people, especially in Philadelphia, were doing. So we were being raised like that, and we would go to families' houses like we can't eat pork, can't eat crabs, we can only eat this and that. So I kind of felt like outside of that part of the culture. So when we finally were able to eat crabs, I was like, hell yes. And now
I love this.
And now, I still look at seafood as like a luxury item because if you're a parent with a whole bunch of children, seafood calorically doesn't go very far, right? So seafood was always a special thing in my family. Another one was grits. We grew up eating grits in the morning, and I would put ketchup in them or butter or whatever. That's another thing we stopped.
You said ketchup?
I know.
I've never seen ketchup in
I don't know
grits.
why we did it.
Ketchup?
Yeah, we put. I think it was like a kid thing. It wasn't like a tradition. I think one day I was like, "Hey, you can make us some ketchup." But also, I remember being on my great grandfather's lap, eating. My mom would make him sunny side up eggs, and he would have grits. And I think he would put hot sauce in it, and maybe it was just the red, and I thought it was ketchup. So when I was old enough to ask for ketchup, maybe she just gave me ketchup and we ate it like that. But I actually never thought about that until just now.
I've seen the hot sauce.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
I've even seen the slice of cheese and you mix it up.
Which I don't like. I'm so anti-cheese and grits.
People either like them sweet or savory.
Yeah,
there's a lot of rules with grits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was one, but that was another thing that we stopped eating because my mom said that there was lye in it and it was not good for because she bought Quaker grits, and I'm sure she was right that it wasn't the best product in the world, but she kind of equated it with nutrition and religion, so then we just stopped eating grits for a long time. So yeah, families, right? What you asked?
Yeah, no, that's real. So, did you ever? A lot of my guests, they're like, "Oh, we didn't really go out to eat much. Most of the meals were at home."
Mm-hmm.
When you did go out to eat, where did you go, or did you?
So no, we didn't really go out to eat at all. And actually, the only times I really went out to eat was a Chinese buffet or there's this thing in Philly called Old Country Buffet that we used to go to. But I primarily went
they have them in Maryland too.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Old Country Buffet is man, I can still taste the chocolate cake that they had on that steam table.
I can still taste the.
But you're generic, American food buffet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that terrible fudge that I would put all over all of the flavor of ice cream they had was mwah, delicious. But we didn't start going out until we really got older. There's this place that we like to go to every now and again called Kilimanjaro, which is an African place on Chestnut Street in Philly. But my family primarily eats halal, and I eat pork now. But we go to this place called Sous, which is it's owned by Middle Easterners, but they serve cheesesteaks and stuff, but also Middle Eastern food. And when my mom cooked and kind of stopped following Nation of Islam stuff, and took on more Sunni stuff, she would cook with more Middle Eastern flavors and stuff in the house. So we just kind of really like where that meets, black our heritage foods and this religious identity that we adopted.
Wow.
So different curries, and my mom loves lamb, and I love lamb. So yeah, we usually try to go out to places like that.
Sounds like she was a really good cook.
Yeah.
I feel like most home cooks would feel a little intimidated by lamb and curries, and but it sounds like she was.
Yeah, she can cook. All of my cooking learning experiences came from her. One of the first things she taught me was how to roast a chicken. And I mean, she still does this now. She'll roast the chicken the first day, eat that for dinner. The next day she picks the meat, and then she'll make like chicken salad and eat chicken salad. And then the next day she'll take the carcass and boil it with vegetables and stuff and eat chicken soup with rice. So she taught me that because she worked all the time, and she wanted me to make dinner for my brothers. So that's a very special meal, or
Wow.
3 days of special meals for me.
Man, that's a smart woman. Because, like, yeah, I do the same thing. Because you can use those, don't throw those bones away.
Right. Yeah.
Turkey,
yeah.
like Thanksgiving, save those bones. Make a stock.
She told me she loved it. I mean, she learned that from her, either her grandma or her aunt. I don't remember which one. But she learned that. She learned about not throwing anything away. When she was young, her and her siblings, if they didn't finish their meals, especially like chicken bones and stuff like that, her grandma would collect all the bones. And one day, my mom told me she came downstairs. She saw her just kind of like eating what the kids didn't eat off those, because she just wouldn't. I think she was from North Carolina, and I'm not like full on her story yet, but I just think she couldn't even imagine not eating that.
Right.
Just imagine how meager her means were,
Right.
1920s, 30s. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of like that 3 days to 4 days worth of meals from one thing stems from that.
Yeah. Wow. No, that's really. Sorry, I just need a minute. I'm like processing, like like your mom seeing that and how like formative that would be for making sure that you are grateful and using food as much as possible to not just like sustain, but like nourish, and like it would give you a lot of gratitude as well.
Absolutely.
For everything, every morsel you could like ever put in your mouth.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you get to go out to eat now, like much at all, or
No.
are you working all the time? Yeah.
No. Yeah, people get really disappointed. They're like, "Oh, I want to go to a nice restaurant. Where should I go?" I'm like, "The Henry."
Yeah, just
I know a good
where I
one.
work. Well, do you have like a favorite restaurant besides Henry?
There's this bar, Captain Dan's, that my girlfriend and I like to go to. They serve burgers and stuff like that. It's in Bed-Stuy on Nostrand and Green. I do really enjoy Speedy Romeo's, but that was also like in that same neighborhood. It was very, very good. Yeah, I don't know. Lately, I feel like I'm just like hyper focused in many areas. You know what I mean? So it's really hard for me to like narrow down. I don't have a go-to spot. I usually eat when I'm at work or when I'm at home. My girlfriend's a pretty good cook, and she's Jamaican, so I get spoiled with that.
Yeah. Why would you?
Yeah. I mean, eventually, I do really enjoy going out to eat, but those aren't my most special meals, And I'm also not like when I eat at home, I'm not processing anything. When I go out to dinner, I'm processing so many different things that I don't enjoy it anywhere near as much as I would at home, or if I just went to the random spot on my corner,
Like you're when you go out to eat, you're like looking at it from the perspective of someone who does this.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's an analyzation for me to like when I leave have an opinion about it, and I don't really want that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just a necessary thing for the profession.
Yep. So I was talking to someone about how like, working in restaurants and then going out to eat is like being a film major and like just going to see a movie. Like you're like, oh, this director used this camera angle or whatever. Like when Corey and I go out, it's the same thing. It's like, oh, this bartender's weeded. Or, we can't just like show up like with no sort of like, without seeing that stuff because we've both done it.
Yeah. I mean, well, you know what? Sometimes it's actually a good thing. Just a couple nights ago, I was out to dinner with a friend, and we went to Lolito, and they were definitely in the weeds. And the server was letting us know. I'm like, listen, don't worry about it. I work in restaurants. It's fine. So, like, I made her feel comfortable. But then she also, like, broke a glass next to us at the table. And, like, I was really happy that it happened next to us because someone else was like, oh, my God, get all these things off my table. But, like, I saw it happen before it happened. And, like, nothing hit our table. Our food was fine. And, like, made her feel good about it. Not good about it, but, you know, like, she didn't freak out about it. So in that way, it can be a good.
You have more empathy.
Right.
For people in restaurants.
Right.
So, what is the worst dining experience you have ever had?
It's actually a not dining experience.
Okay.
I'll never forget this. I was maybe 13 years old.
Oh,
Dead ass. 13, because like people wouldn't think that this is what happened, right? But you know, people say in between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, it's a red state. So my father picked my brother and I up. We went to this place. We sat down. No one came over to us. My dad got up, walked over to the person at the counter, and all I know is that we left. And then when we left, we started driving, and he was like, they don't serve black people there.
Oh, my God.
Now, I don't know how much of that was in his head or whatever, but it happened, right? This was in 2000. So, any experience, I don't know. I don't have bad experiences at restaurants. I don't think that I go to restaurants where I will have a bad experience.
Wow.
So that was, that was the worst experience that I ever had.
Wow.
I did not come here prepared with that story.
So that there's been a similar story told by Chef Todd Richards, who wrote Soul. His same thing happened to his family at a restaurant outside of Chicago.
Wow.
Yeah, growing up.
Yeah, northern places, right?
Yeah, which, well, I mean, we could do a whole nother show on, the myths of northern utopias for everyone. Everyone's welcome. No, right. I lived in Boston for 9 years, so I know firsthand that's not true.
I'm waiting for that book. I'm waiting for your Boston book.
A book just about Boston, or?
I mean, I'm pretty sure you could write a book about your experiences in Boston. It's a crazy place.
Oh, boy. I need more of these. I just pointed at a cocktail that I have. For listeners, they can't see that. So my last question for you, if you could have your last meal in a restaurant, where would it be and who is invited?
I just want my family. We go eat at Sod's.
At Sod's?
Yeah, that's the place I told you about. That's owned by Middle Easterns in Philly. Yeah, that's it.
That's it?
That's it.
What are you having? Yeah.
Cheesesteaks, rice, lamb. My mom makes, sometimes she makes curry turkey, so I encourage her to sneak that in there.
I mean, you can have whatever you want.
Really?
Stuff from other restaurants too.
Yeah, I'm hibiscus tea, bread. I'm at my heart of hearts, I'm a simple person. And if it's like my last meal at a restaurant, like why would I want it to be at, like, I don't know, per se, or even like Speedy Romeo for that matter. No, I just want to be around that.
So, just your family or some friends too, or just?
My friends are my family.
Can you, in your interview, talk about them and can you just shout them out real quick? Because I feel like, it's so important to let your community know that you see them and you appreciate them.
Oh.
I just want.
I got a really big community. So my best friend, his name is Justin. My play cousin Joe, who lives in North Carolina. My friend Kurt. I'm sure you've heard of Kurt.
Oh, we met in New Orleans.
Okay, yeah, he does EMI dinners, but he's also just like a really, really good friend of mine, one of my best friends.
Yeah, shout out to Kurt.
My if I had restaurant parents, Nicole Taylor and Craig Samuel. Craig Samuel owns the Peaches franchise in Brooklyn.
Shout out to Nicole.
Shout out to Nicole.
My first guest ever.
Yeah, shout out to her. Man, You know, it sounds like an Oscar speech.
I'd like to thank.
Like those people. Runner and Stone. Do you know that restaurant in Gowanus? Runner and Stone is owned by Peter Andrus and Chris Pazzulli. It's basically they created like my first real home in New York. You know, Andrew and Kristen Wood at a restaurant called Russet in Philly. They're my family. You know, there's a lot.
So what are you drinking?
What am I drinking? Whiskey.
What kind?
Whiskey. Man. So like I told you earlier, what did I ask you for earlier? Like a simple beer, Brooklyn Lager.
You said cheaper the better.
Cheaper the better. I usually drink Evan Williams.
Okay.
I usually drink that, but also, I mean, like in a higher realm, I like Knob Creek. That's a good one. I like Woodford Reserve. That's a good one. So if anyone wants to bring that, you know, please do. But I will be supplying all the Evan Williams for anyone who will have it. But I also have to consider, you know, my girlfriend Sasha, who loves tequila, so I got to have a little bit of that for her. Margaritas.
I mean, it's your last meal. You might as well.
My last meal. I
Whiskey and tequila.
Got to ball out, right?
Sounds great.
Got to ball out.
Sounds great.
Whiskey and tequila.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I feel like this could go on for another hour.
Thank you. I feel like we're not even like on this show. We're just kind of like chit-chat.
Yeah, this is definitely like most of my shows are an introduction to a chef. This feels like a conversation with a friend. So
right on.
Thank you for being here.
Cool.
Great. And thank you so much. Oh wait, can you tell listeners where they can find you?
Yes. So I primarily function through Instagram at Coltrane, COLTRANE 215. And I am almost always at the Henry. I'm the sous chef there, and the address there is 19 West 31st Street. Come there tonight. Come there tomorrow. Come there every day. I'm there every day.
Great. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And thank you so much for listening. We'll catch you next week on A Hungry Society.
Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. For our freshest content and to learn more about our 10-year anniversary celebration happening all year long, subscribe to our newsletter. Enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at heritage_radio. You can also find us at facebook.com/Heritage Radio Network.
Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization driving conversations to make the world a better, fairer, more delicious place. And we couldn't do it without support from listeners like you. Want to be part of the food world's most innovative community? Subscribe to the shows you like, tell your friends, and please join the HRN family by becoming a member. Just click on the beating heart at the top right of our homepage. Thanks for listening.